Now we turn to South Africa. The country's apex court made a ruling today. It has disqualified Jacob Zuma, South Africa's former president. He cannot stand in next week's election. This is because of a prior prison sentence. In 2021, Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Anyone who's sentenced to more than 12 months cannot contest in South Africa's election. That is the law. After months of back and forth, the courts have upheld this law. So Zuma is disqualified. It's a blow to his new MK party. And it looks like a boon for the ruling party, that is the ANC, the African National Congress. So how did this happen? And what does this mean for Zuma in the upcoming election? We'll go through these points one by one. First, the how. Jacob Zuma is a former president. He was in charge of South Africa from May 2009 to February 2018. That was when he was in the ANC. But in 2018, Zuma was forced to step down. Corruption was rife in South Africa and Zuma was associated with a notorious family, the Indian origin Guptas. The Guptas were accused of state capture, of running South Africa like their own feudal fiefdom. And Zuma was said to be closely tied to this family. In fact, he was often mocked and called Zupta back then, to show how close he was to the Guptas. So Zuma was under pressure. He stepped down in 2018. He was probed for corruption for years. Zuma got summons after summons until finally in 2021, he refused to cooperate any further. He chose to defy the courts. And for this non-cooperation, for his contempt of court, Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison. But he served less than 3 months. He was released on medical grounds and the rest of his sentence was eventually pardoned. But the fact remains that Jacob Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in jail, and on that basis, South Africa's top court chose to disqualify him. Let me quote from this verdict. It is declared that Mr. Zuma was convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months' imprisonment and is accordingly not eligible to be a member of and not qualified to stand for election to the National Assembly. So Zuma cannot contest, which means he cannot become president again, because in South Africa, the president is chosen from among members of parliament, like the Prime Minister in India, or the UK, or other countries. But to get the top job, you need to be an MP. Now that Zuma is disqualified, he cannot become president. What does this mean for the upcoming election? Well, not very much. Zuma's win was anyway a long shot. His new MK party was polling at about 8% last month, hardly enough to win the election with or without Zuma as a candidate. Today's disqualification might energize some of his supporters. It may get his party some sympathy votes, but that will not turn an 8% into a 50%. So the MK party's fortunes won't change very much. And Zuma will continue to be the party's face.
The results have been announced on the court, where they said that President Jacob Zuma must not be on the list going to parliament. But Jacob Zuma is still, I'm emphasizing, Jacob Zuma is still a party leader.
But this could affect the ANC, the ruling party of South Africa. They face a challenge this year. The ANC is the party of Nelson Mandela. They brought an end to apartheid in South Africa, an end to institutional racism and segregation. And since then, the ANC has won every election in this country. They've ruled continuously since 1994. But 30 years on, they face voter discontent. Corruption is still rife. Unemployment is high, especially among the youth. Crimes, including murders, are on the rise. Many South Africans are clamoring for change. So the ANC might not win more than 50% of the vote this year. Polls say they will still end up the largest party, with about 40% of the vote, which means the ANC will be vulnerable. If all the opposition parties band together, they could oust the ANC. So Zuma's disqualification could go either way for them. It may galvanize his supporters. It could also demoralize them. South Africa goes to polls next week on the 29th of May. That's when we'll find out the impact of Jacob Zuma's disqualification.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.